First of all, your visit to Scotland. You flew in on Saturday.
Yes.
How's it been so far?
It's been beautiful. Yes, it's. I'm here with my husband, and we've enjoyed it very much. I have to say, it's kind of weird to, when I landed, I was met by Pauline and Suzanne, and they said, "Oh, everyone is so excited! The conference is oversold, and all of this stuff." And I was just like, "Wow, it's amazing."
There's been massive anticipation to you arriving for months now, and you can tell by the people in the room. So, thank you ever so much. And if you think this is a crowd, wait till tomorrow. But that's tomorrow. The film Resilience has played a massive part in the movement, and Karen and John from the Violence Reduction Unit in the past have spoken about ACES and how it's been around for 10 plus years. But now ACES is gaining traction. A lot of that, we believe, is down to the film Resilience. It's had a massive impact in Scotland, as we know. Did it have the same impact in America?
It has. Maybe not quite as much as in Scotland, I have to say, because as I was chatting with folks before we began, people were really excited. But it has. There have been screenings all over the U.S. In fact, I believe that Jamie Redford and his team, have screened the film more than 40,000 viewings, screenings of the film, which is just incredible, and it's all over the world.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to stay with America, and I want to talk about leadership in this section as well, and how your leadership style has changed and adapted over the years. Is America becoming an ACE-aware nation? Is there still a lot of work to do over the pond?
Oh,
and I don't want to use. I'm not using the Trump word today, right? So I'm not doing that. But where is America on this journey?
I think America is becoming an ACE-aware nation. We're big, right? So almost 400 million people. It's a lot of folks. But what's interesting, and I think that what's been a really important part of this message is that the Resilience film has played a huge role, and media and messaging has absolutely been critical as part of the ACE movement. I heard that Vince Felitti was here in 2007, right? And I will tell you that in the U.S., after Dr. Felitti and Dr. Anda published the study, and they published it in all these medical journals, and they went around talking about it really in scientific circles. And I remember in 2011, there was an article about me and my work that came out in the New Yorker magazine. And I got a call from Vince Felitti, and he said, "I really have to congratulate you. We have been talking about this work for over a decade, and this article came out in a lay publication, not a scientific journal, and the reception has been greater than with any of the scientific publications." So I think one of the pieces that is really important is, as scientists, we think that we're going to communicate in the language of science, but what we recognize is that ACEs really speak to the basic human condition. They really speak to the reality that most of us experience, and it helps to give an understanding and a framework. And so the more different ways that we can communicate that in ways that are relevant and have cultural context, I think that's absolutely critically important. And the other piece that we hear about in the U.S. in particular is that, we hear about the left is doing this, the progressives are doing this, the conservatives are doing that. And in the run-up to the 2016 election, one of the best-selling books was a book called Hillbilly Elegy, and it was written by a gentleman by the name of J.D. Vance. And he was from Middle America, right? Part of the U.S. we call Appalachia. and where everyone is conservative, right? And it's kind of historically coal mining country and all of that kind of stuff. And I was, and a friend of mine texted me, "Oh my God, have you read J.D. Vance's book?" I said, "I haven't read it. I heard everyone's using it to describe the Trump phenomenon," right? And my friend said, "Oh, you have to pick up the book because J.D. Vance talks about you in his book." And it's a book about conservative, very, very, middle America folks who he grew up with ACEs. And he said that he calls it he describes at the beginning of the book a scene where a relative of his, someone talks to him badly, says something about his mother, and he jumps out and gets a tire iron and beats the guy nearly, half senseless. And they call it hillbilly justice, right? Because they're hillbillies. And he said he realized that what actually happened in his life was that he had experienced ACEs. And he said, "I would never go to a therapist, but I would go to the library. And I learned about ACEs, and I realized that what was going on in my body was just that every encounter I was having with a person, it was like that person was a bear." And he's like, and I realized, I didn't have to have that response. And through his wife, he recognized, the final scene is someone cuts him off in traffic, and he reaches for the door handle, right? And he's about to go beat the guy up. And then he realizes, you know what, I don't have to do that. And it was really transformative. So I think that we have a lot to deal with in Washington right now, but honestly, it doesn't matter if you're a conservative or a progressive. We're talking about the fundamental human condition, and everyone has a role to play in being part of the solution.
Let's talk about when you first started to talk about ACEs. What sort of resistance, if any, did you come across? Did some people go, "Do you know what? What a load of old claptrap, mumbo jumbo, doesn't exist"?
Yeah, it's so funny. So one of the things, if you, and I know that everyone receives the deepest well as part of being here and being part of this conference, and part of the reason why I wrote the book was because I was hearing all of these different pieces. Oh, is it real science? Oh, it's not real science. That I don't have to worry about because I am a super duper science nerd, and science literally is my favorite thing. And so when it comes to having a debate with someone about the biological mechanisms, bring it on. I will do that every day and twice on Sundays, right? But what I also recognized was some of the biggest resistance was simply fear, right? Fear that, so all kinds of fear. Fear that if we talk about ACEs or if we medicalize it, that it's going to be stigmatizing. Folks said, "Oh, are you telling me that our kids are brain damaged? Are you?" Yeah, and it was some of it was just the nature of trauma itself, which is that you want to push it away. Right? That's how trauma works in the brain. I'm learning this from my mental health colleagues, right? Is that the whole point of trauma is that our response to it is aversive, right? We don't like it, and so we push it away. And so the concept of seeing it and being open to it, I think a lot of people are afraid, and especially medical providers, are afraid that if they begin to talk about it, that we're opening Pandora's box and that we won't be able to close it again. And for all of those folks, I say a couple of things. Number one, once you know this information, you can't unknow it, right? And for me, and I think in general, once we know, particularly that ACEs lead to the problems that it leads to, I believe that it is unethical not to act. And we saw this, a lot of the research that my team has been doing is not only on the biomedical mechanisms of adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress, but also we've been very, very intentional in studying how do you build a movement. And much of the work that we've done has been modeled after the movement with HIV/AIDS. Because you want to talk about stigmatizing, right? That was stigmatizing. People believed that that was the Lord smiting you for doing that bad behavior that you shouldn't be doing in the first place. And if something terrible happens to you, well, you know, it's the hand of the Lord. And what we understood was when we, and I literally actually had the opportunity to sit down with folks who were very involved and with some of the doctors who were on the front lines of that movement and who shaped our public health response to that movement. And there were a couple of things that I learned from them. Number one, I was saying this to Pauline in the car over, our work is based on our understanding of how an exposure leads to an outcome, and equally as importantly, right, our belief in the integrity of that understanding. So when we recognize that ACEs lead to toxic stress, which leads to negative health outcomes, and we believe that this science is rigorous, right, and that we have done an excellent job in vetting the science, right, which is what's happening, which is we have done and we're continuing to do, right, and this is why I and my team keep a very strong grounding in the science. That means that we don't have a choice but to act, right, and when we act, it's going to be scary because there will be unanticipated outcomes. No medical professional has ever engaged in any professional activity without dealing with unanticipated outcomes. But when we look forward and say, okay, but that doesn't mean that we just sit on our hands, because if we do that, every day folks are experiencing negative outcomes as a result of what they've experienced. So we have to raise the alarm. We have to shout from the rooftops. And when we do that, we also engage with both our allies and our opponents to say, okay, you guys are concerned about stuff, share with us what you're concerned about. Let's have the early warning systems. Let's figure out how to respond together to unanticipated consequences, because there will be some, but we cannot keep that from allowing us to be able to act.
So fear encompasses all that. So when we leave today and we start to have those challenging conversations with people about ACEs, we need to be prepared to have those challenging conversations.
Yes.
And be able to tackle those fears of other people and I suppose maybe ourselves in that way. And I think that's where I love that self-care phrase that you talk about comes in an awful lot. We're heading towards the break shortly, and I'm sure we'll head back at the back and forth because there'll be lots of questions. I want to talk and touch on leadership and your leadership. So there are leaders in this room who would be really interested to hear about your journey. You're a mum of 4, you're a CEO, you're a world-renowned paediatrician, as I mentioned, author. How do you find the time? And what about you and self-care? How do you cope?
All great questions, and it's hilarious when I hear you say it. Because, so, number one, yes, it's very challenging. And so if you're in it for the outcome, it's going to be difficult. I think that one of the biggest things and one of the most important things as part of my leadership is recommitting every day to the process. It's kind of like being married, right? You look at your spouse and you're like, I know I said I do how many years ago, but I got to recommit to you every day, right? And the other piece of it, one of the most difficult things for me has been and it's related a little bit to the fear piece, is being able to be comfortable with saying, I don't know. I need help. This is beyond me, right? I don't have the resources to do this. I need support. And it's really surprising is that people really step up. I think sometimes when we think about leadership, we kind of assume, well, if you're a leader, you have to have all the answers, right? And I don't pretend to come close to having all the answers. But what I do know is that I have the passion and the commitment to keep asking the questions. And so that's where that self-care comes in. That's really critical. It's hilarious. All the things that I talk about in the book around, sleep, exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, mental health, and healthy relationships, every single one of those I do in spades. But if I were to say briefly a couple of things. One, the person who you choose to share your life journey with, I don't think that there's almost no important decision or healthcare decision. My husband nurtures me from the inside out every day. This work is hard, and when I get home, he is my support and my helpmate. And there are days when, it's ironic. I'm just like, I studied the stress response, and my own stress response is going to kill me. And we remember, it's not about absence of any stress. It's about the buffering, nurturing relationships, and that's what my husband provides every day. And the other piece is, I meditate, I work out, I talk to my therapist now every other week. All of these things that are the basics, and the thing that keeps me in this on a daily basis is just connecting in that heart way to the young people who are affected and recognizing, all right, if it's just this one person that I made a difference for, it's worth it.
We're nearly there. I have one more. Go on, you can applaud if you want. I think that was a cue for an applause. Are you happy to share with us what perhaps has been your biggest challenge on the journey to date?
Yes, I am happy to share that. Very frankly, my biggest challenge has been something that people would consider to be very mundane. It's organizational development and being an effective CEO and running an organization. In order to do all this work, we have to have a well-functioning organization. But here's a funny thing that happens. The funny thing that happens is that when you're running an organization that's focused on ACEs, right, two things happen. One, that people expect it to be a stress-free work environment. It's not. Right? No, for real. People are like, oh my gosh, you're asking me to deliver on a deadline. It's toxic stress. This is not trauma-informed. And that's been really, really challenging. And I think especially, I will say, as a woman CEO, running a high-performing, accountable organization is really difficult also, because I think that our society, frankly, has different expectation of women leaders, right? I think that people respond differently to... my husband is also a CEO, and there are times when I come home and I was like, really? You said that in the office? Right? Like, really? Because I could never get away with saying that, right? I think that, recognizing that, I think there are certain ways that I engage as a woman leader that might be a little bit different than if I were a man. But organizational development and some of just the really hard stuff about, like, what do you do if you have a staff member who you love and you're passionate about, and they're wonderful and they're not meeting their metrics, and you have to transition them. You either have to coach them up or coach them out, right? I hate that stuff. And my way of solving it, frankly, has been, my way of solving it is I try as much as possible to dedicate my time and my talents to the areas where I can be of the best and highest use, and I try to get folks who have complementary skill sets to mine to be able to do the things that I'm frankly not good at doing. And you know, I wish it were something more lofty, like, oh, it's impossible to get so and so. But really, the hardest part has been just the operationalization. That's all the mundane daily stuff is the stuff that's really difficult.
I think there'll be people in this audience that will go, brilliant, you too. And they'll go, yes, okay. One last question before we break for a coffee, cup of tea. We all leave here. Well, some of us are going to the conference tomorrow. Some of us are going to our day jobs tomorrow and so on. One thing that we can all do when we leave this afternoon, to make this continue to happen, what would you say we should be doing if there's one key thing?
Can I say two things?
With pleasure.
So my two things would be, number one, continue to shout it from the rooftops, raising awareness, because knowledge is power, and we also don't know who we're inspiring, what actions and work we're inspiring by doing this. But number two, also moving from awareness to action. And those actions can be big or small. They can be simply making sure that we're practicing self-care. It can be going home and talking to the folks in our local school system, or your own doctor, or your child's doctor, or whoever it is. Or you know, if you're a member of parliament, going and, you know, whatever it is within your realm, within your own little space. That's what I would say is continuing to raise the awareness, and then taking it the next step and moving from awareness to action.
Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation for Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. Thank you.